Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Today I'm going to show you how I made this coffee table with a removable lid to store puzzles and games. I'm going to be staining this coffee table a dark brown color, so for the wood I'm using poplar, 8/4 boards for the legs and 4/4 boards for the aprons and top. The lumber I purchased is rough cut, so I'm going to dimension it all by getting it to its rough length at the chop saw, running it through the joiner, then through the table saw, and then planing all the boards to the proper thickness. Once I'm done dimensioning the lumber, I can cut everything to its final length and then take a couple passes with my hand plane to get rid of any tracks or snipe that might be left from the planer and joiner. The main part of the coffee table is like a large box with the top being the lid. The aprons are going to be held together with large finger joints, and I'll make those at the table saw. I'll start setting up for the joinery by adding a sacrificial board to my miter fence. Then I'll do a quick check to make sure the fence is square to my saw blade. Once I know I got the table saw set up correctly, I'll start laying out for the finger joints. This is similar to laying out for dovetails. I'll start by using a marking gauge to mark the depth of the cut that I'm going to make, and then I'll come back in with a set of dividers to make sure that my finger joints are evenly spaced. Then I can strike lines into the boards using my marking knife and a square to mark out where the finger joints are going to go. I'll darken them in with a pencil and mark out the waist so I don't get confused when I'm making the cut. And once I have everything properly laid out, I'm ready to head over to the table saw and start making the cuts. I cut these finger joints out freehand at the table saw. If I were going to be doing many more joints or a lot more sides, I probably would have made a finger joint jig. There are plenty of plans online to make these, and they're very quick and easy, and it probably would have made it a little bit more accurate. But I just took my time, made sure I was lined up on each waistline, and made the cut, and I think everything turned out pretty good. So after the finger joints are all complete and test fitted, I'll head over to the router table and cut a 1/2 groove in the bottom of all the aprons. The grooves in the apron are there to hold a piece of 1/2 plywood, similar to what you would see in a drawer bottom. I positioned the groove in the bottom of the apron so that on the long aprons, the groove was between the finger joints, so I could route all the way through with no problems. And then on the short aprons, I just had to plunge the router in so that I didn't go all the way to the ends and you wouldn't be able to see the grooves from the sides. After finishing up the grooves on the aprons, I took the 1/2 plywood and cut it to width and length at the table saw. Each side or leg is made up of 4 1 3/4 inch boards cut at 8-degree angles. To start, I'll cut all the boards to length, setting the table saw blade at that 8-degree angle. Here I'm marking out for some shoulders that are going to go onto the side boards of the leg assemblies. The top and bottom boards will rest into this, giving a little more glue surface area. That, combined with the screws that will be added later, should make this a pretty rigid assembly. I'll create the shoulders over at the table saw. I haven't moved the blade angle since cutting the leg boards to length, so that should ensure that I get a good tight fit between the top and bottom boards and the side boards. So as I was finishing up cutting all the parts for the legs, I started to get concerned that the leg assemblies could rack, and if I put too much weight on the coffee table, especially from a side perspective, I could fold the legs underneath the table. So to fix this, I added a brace across the bottom that goes between each leg. The brace is going to hold on to each leg assembly by a half-lap joinery. So here I'm just dimensioning that leg brace out, and then I'll cut the half-lap joints into the leg brace and into the bottom of the leg assemblies. Then I'm able to clean up the rough joints and fine-tune them with a combination of my shoulder plane and bench chisels. And I also took this opportunity to clean up the shoulders that I created in the leg assemblies the same way with the shoulder plane and chisels. And then I went back in and sanded all the inside faces of the leg assemblies, since that would be a lot harder to do after everything was glued up. After a bit of sanding, I went ahead and marked out and drilled countersinks for the screws that are also hold the leg assemblies together. Then I went back in and applied some glue to all the shoulder assemblies and installed the screws. After I finished screwing all the leg assemblies together, I plugged all the screw holes with some 3/8" dowel that I cut to size. I glued everything together and then came in with a flush cut saw and trimmed everything up. After I was done plugging up all the screw holes, I came back in and sanded everything with 150 grit sandpaper. I didn't want to go any more than 150 grit because I'll be staining this project later, and anything more than 150 grit, the stain doesn't seem to adhere to the wood as well. Once I was finished sanding all the parts of the leg assemblies, I was able to install the cross brace. This isn't going to get any screws, just the glue surface area alone should be plenty strong enough. So I'll glue everything in and then use a couple of quick clamps to hold everything together. Next is time to do the final assembly of the apron. I'll apply glue to all the finger joints, install the 1/2" shelf that I made earlier, and clamp everything together and let the glue dry overnight. The next morning I took some 150 grit sandpaper and cleaned all the finger joints up with my random orbital sander. I worked my way around all 4 aprons and then just gave the whole apron assembly a light sanding. Here I'm using my trim router to create a rabbet detail across the top of the apron assembly. The top's not going to bolt directly to the apron, so it might not always sit perfectly aligned, and this little detail that breaks up the top from the apron should make it harder to notice it when it's not perfect. Also, this will give your fingers a place to grab the top and remove it when you're working on the puzzle. After finishing up with the router, I went back and did a little hand sanding on the rabbet detail just to clean up any router marks or burn marks. Now I'm ready to start working on the top. The top's going to be made up of 5 boards, and I'll start by trimming them all to size at the table saw. Then I'll lay the boards out on my workbench and look for any gaps or problems with the seams. I'm not too concerned with the grain pattern here since I'm using a really dark stain. You're not going to see much of that anyways. Just want to make sure that the glue up's going to go nice and smooth. I'm using biscuit joinery to keep the top aligned when I glue everything up, so once I'm satisfied with the layout, I'll use my biscuit joiner to create all the notches. Now I'm ready to start gluing up the top. The biscuit joinery doesn't add much strength to the top, but it does make aligning everything when I'm doing the glue up a lot easier. Once I've applied glue to all the surfaces, I'll put everything together, hold it together with some clamps, and let it sit overnight. Once the top's had enough time to dry, I'll remove all the excess glue from each seam using a paint scraper. This system works pretty good as long as you don't apply too much pressure. It doesn't gouge out the material too bad. Next I'll use my low angle jack plane to clean up the glue line the rest of the way and to flatten the tabletop out. I don't have to do a ton of work here since I use the biscuit joinery and everything aligned pretty well. Once I have everything relatively flat, I'll go over to the table saw and cut the top to its final length and its final width. I'll use my hand plane again to remove any saw marks and to fine tune the top and make it fit as best I can to the apron assembly. Then I'll use some 150 grit sandpaper on my random orbital sander to clean up both sides of the top. The bottom of the top assembly gets these 2 blocks in opposing corners, and this will just help the top self-align to the apron assembly. They're just held on with some glue and a couple pin nails. After getting them installed, I'll give everything a light sanding and then trim the blocks with my shoulder plane to get the top and the apron assembly to align well. To finish this project, I'm going to start with using a gel stain by General Finishes. The color is Java. It's pretty dark and I'm going to use 2 coats. This stain's really easy to apply and turns out looking great. I'll leave a link in the description of the stain that I'm using and the top coat just in case you're interested. For the top coat on this project, I'm using General Finishes Armor Seal Satin Polyurethane. This is a pretty easy finish to apply as well, and I've been using it on a lot of project videos. I'll start by putting 2 coats on, and then I'll knock it down with some 4/0 steel wool, and then come back and apply 2 more coats. To install the apron assembly to the base, I'm just using wood screws. I'll start by drilling some pilot holes with some countersinks, and then come back in with some 1¼ inch wood screws on each side. I'm lining the inside of the apron assembly with this vinyl material that I picked up at a fabric store. It's heavy enough to where it doesn't have a lot of memory and it'll lay flat in the bottom. I'm not going to glue it down or anything. This way if it gets dirty in there, she can just pick it up and wipe it off or shake it off and then reinstall it. Then all I got to do is install the top and this project's finished. I'm pretty happy with how the coffee table turned out, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Leave me a comment and tell me what you think. Thanks for watching.